Hello again, this is the 15th of June 2022 and today I'm going to be talking about face blindness. I've been offline for quite some time. That's because I have a new baby and she's a good sleeper and everything, but as you may be aware, a mother's work is never done and I don't really get time for this sort of thing very much anymore. Anyway, enough of that. What is face blindness? Face blindness is a below average ability to recognise faces. It's more prevalent amongst autistic people than the general population, which could be down to brain development, or it could be down to just not looking at people's faces when you speak to them. It's very easy to imagine that a neurotypical person who focuses on people's eyes when they're speaking, they take in the shape of the eyes and the eyebrows and the colour of the eyes, the cheekbones, etc. All the time they're communicating that bit. Whereas if you tend to look away from their faces or just look towards their chin or the top of their head, or whatever, as autistic people often do, then you can see how you wouldn't take in all those sort of the minutiae of the facial features to the same extent. Personally, I've got a fairly mild case of it. I won't go through my full autobiography. I think I probably had it to a greater degree when I was younger, and then throughout my 20s, it sort of gradually improved for various reasons. Or maybe I'm just, taking more notice of the people around me. I don't know. Okay. But yeah, I can talk about having it to quite a great degree, remembering my teenage years, and a sort of milder case that I seem to have now, I think. Yeah, again, it's another of those things that you might not realise you even have until you actually read about it and think, oh yeah, that's one of the ways that I've kind of struggled throughout my life. It was only when I started to read about face blindness that I realised that not everybody sort of sees faces the way I do. Not everybody can, walk into, say, a classroom when they're at school and see a sea of, dark-haired people and blonde people, and that's it. It's two different kinds of people there. That they actually see all the, the long nose and short nose and big mouth and small mouth and cheekbones and chins, and they see all these things straight away. They stand out and they remember that person, whereas I don't particularly. I can look at a face and say, yeah, that's a man, a woman, an old person, young person, etc. Maybe if something really stands out, like got a big scar or whatever, but it won't look particularly different to someone else who matches that vague description. It isn't something that's hugely debilitating. It gets a bit embarrassing sometimes, if you're talking to someone and they obviously know you from somewhere. And they sort of stop you in the street and say, oh, hello, hi, how are you? Oh, I haven't seen you for ages. And you've got no idea who they are. That's kind of a bit embarrassing sometimes. Once it's happened to you a few times, you just sort of manage to bluff your way through these things. I suppose in my line of work as well, I'm a checkout assistant, and I've been working in the same shop for 11 years. And there's quite a lot of customers who I don't know them, but they, they sort of stop and have a natter at my till, and we sort of recognise each other, and I've seen the kids grow up and what have you. And they'll see me elsewhere out of work and stop me and say, I know you from somewhere, where do I know you from? And I just automatically now say where I work. And they say, yes, that's right, you're the checkout girl. And they know me, but if I had to testify in court, I would say I have never seen this person in my life. Their face just means nothing to me. Even when I'm actually in work, people come up to me and say something that suggests we've at least spoken before. They'll sort of say, oh, how's your son doing, or something like that. I don't know who they are. Or something that suggests I'm familiar to them, like, oh, you've worked here a long time now, haven't you? How long have you worked here now? Oh, I've not seen you for a bit. Have you been on holiday? And no idea who they are. And then the other thing is, I will sometimes see someone who maybe I went to school with, 20 years ago. And I still recognise them. It's odd the way that my brain kind of picks up on some people and latches onto them, and others it completely dismisses. I can't explain that. There isn't, any sort of logic to it, or any rule to it. Some people I will remember, some people nothing. Generally, if I've met someone several times and I've got reason to remember them, like they're maybe a new colleague at work, I've worked a few shifts with them, I will remember them. If it's the first time I've seen them and then they leave the room, the face is gone, And as I was describing before, some of them will stay with me, for the rest of my life. Some will eventually fade away. And there's a kind of phenomenon that I've noticed as well. I don't know if this is just me or if it's a prosopagnosia thing. I don't kind of update faces. Maybe it's just a general human thing, I don't know. Like, when I look in a mirror, just for a split second, I see my own face and I'm kind of surprised to see, an adult woman looking back at me, with a bit of grey hair and crow's feet and what have you. I'm sort of still expecting to see a teenage girl, sort of subconsciously. Obviously, intellectually, I know how old I am. But it surprises me to actually see my own face as a grown-up, just for a moment. And sometimes I kind of see, my mum or my dad looking back at me, or my nana. And then I realise it's me as an adult. Does that make sense? Of course, now, my mum is kind of the age that, her mum was when I knew her. And she just looked very like her mum. And sometimes I look at my mum or her sister, who also looks very, very much the same. She's got very strong genes. And I see my nan, who's been dead for, she died in 2001, that's 21 years ago, she's been dead. And I, just for a moment, I see her, just in my mum or my auntie's face. And yeah, that's a bit of a weird feeling. And because obviously I know what my mum and her sister look like. I know how old they are now. But, there's that kind of emotional reaction, that illogical, instant, subconscious thing that obviously what I know and what I am just seeing in that moment are two different things. Does that make sense? Does it make sense? It doesn't actually make any sense to me, and I'm the one it happens to, okay? And my son, I know my son is 4 years old, but if I try and picture him, I picture him when he was maybe about 2. And then I have to remind myself, no, he's older than that now. Yeah, no, I can picture him being 2 years old. I can picture him being how he is now, but it's... It's, yeah, it's a funny one. And can I imagine what a person looks like who isn't present? I can... Yes, I can picture them, but it's almost like a caricature of their face. I find it very difficult to picture all the, the sort of texture of skin and, how hair falls and things, if I'm trying to visualise, someone's appearance. Even someone I know very well. They sort of look like a sketch of themselves. And it does throw me as well when, people do their hair differently, or if someone with glasses takes the glasses off, they can look like 2 or 3 different people, just over the course of a day, to me. I remember there was a place I worked a few years ago, and there was one of my colleagues walking around who I never actually knew. I never knew her name. And then I realised it was actually a colleague who I had talked to several times, and spent quite a bit of time working with, who usually had her hair down, but then every so often she'd tie it up. I just think, and to me it was a different person. It just looked like a completely different person. I mean, that's kind of how I recognise people, by, the peripherals of their appearance, the sort of colour, length, style of the hair, and the way they dress, how tall they are, how fat they are, if they've got any sort of really distinguishing marks, like, tattoos and scars and things like that sort of make them stand out. And it does surprise me as well how other people recognise each other's faces. Once, my mum took me out to see a show at a theatre. And this was when I was, how old would I be? 22. I was 22. And she pointed to a guy at the bar in the interval. He just pointed to him. He stood with his back to us. And she said, "Oh, is that the art teacher at Hall Cross School?" I said, I don't know. I don't know the art teacher at Hall Cross School. She said, "Yes, you do. You went to that open day." And this was actually 6 years earlier, when I was 16. I was choosing where I wanted to go to do my A-levels, and we'd been to Hall Cross School. It's a school, okay. For people who don't live around here, it's just a school with a sixth form, okay. And we'd sort of walk through the art room. I hadn't stopped particularly long. I wanted to do art for A-level, but I'd sort of decided by then that I didn't want to go to that particular school. So I just sort of walked through the room. And my mum was with me at the time. And she recognised this guy who she'd briefly been in a room with 6 years earlier. And expected me to as well. Now, I don't know if my mum has some sort of super ability to recognise faces, or if that's just normal, but to me that just blew my mind. that she could do that. And several times, we'd be walking down the street and she'd, point out someone passing by and say, "Oh, that's so-and-so." I have no idea. It's just, a complete stranger to me. And it'd be, maybe someone I've been at primary school with, or, sometimes the parents of people have been at primary school. I suppose she'd be more likely to recognise them because, she'd stand in the playground and maybe talk to them in the playground while they were waiting for us to come out or whatever. But, she'd recognise people from years and years ago who, were not in any way significant. And I wouldn't get a saw, just in an instant. She wouldn't have to, have a particularly good look at them. Sometimes passing by in the car, she'd point at someone walking by and say, "Oh yeah, that's so and so lives down the street, number 8." And I'd be like, really. I don't know. I actually don't know what half my neighbours look like. I couldn't describe a lot of my neighbours. The guy next door who I talk to occasionally. The people over the road, my son plays there with their kids, so we sort of get chatting a few times. The rest of them, I don't know, blank. Couldn't pick them out of a lineup, Yeah, it's is it debilitating as such? Not particularly. You kind of find your way around situations when you don't recognise people. I think it's one of those things that, every so often, everybody, tries to, place someone and forgets where they know them from, or just sort of walk straight past someone they know and doesn't look, or whatever, and you can just sort of laugh it off as, "Oh, silly me, not looking," "Oh, I was distracted, sorry, I didn't see you there," that sort of thing. And, well, people seem, as far as I'm aware, people always seem to forgive me for it. And you do sort of find ways of bluffing your way through conversations if you don't recognise someone. And they seem to know you. It's one of those things that I think it causes difficulties depending on what your job is. Maybe some people suffer a lot more than others. I find watching films sometimes quite difficult as well. If two of the actors are, adult man with short brown hair. I can't tell one from the other. It gets quite confusing, especially if it's something like, if it's set in a war and everyone's dressed in a soldier's uniform. I can't even tell them apart by how they're dressed. That gets really difficult. If there's sort of a good mixture of men and women and blonde and dark hair, and they're all dressed differently, and some have got beards and some and they do look dramatically different from each other. That's fine. I can follow that perfectly well. But when there's lots of very similar people, similar looking people, that's when I kind of realise that everyone else can do something I can't. difficult to really know if it's a big problem when, you know, people are just kind of being polite. You know, they don't sort of want to say that they were upset that you didn't recognise them. Do people get upset about that? I don't know. No, I don't think I would. But then I'm not everybody else, clearly. Yeah, I'll stop rambling now. I think that's pretty much all I can bring to mind to say about face blindness right now. If anyone has any questions, anything they like clarifying, any sort of experiences, any disputes, anything like that, pop them in the comments and I'll respond. I do nearly always respond to comments. I like comments. I like to know how I'm doing. I know that somebody has moved to respond. I left my cuckoo clock. It's actually 10 o'clock. It'd be interesting to know how many cuckoos it does. Right. Yeah. I don't know, it's broken. It just cuckoos however many times it wants. Yeah, if you know anything about cuckoo clocks as well, comment please. Because I don't know if there's anything I can do to fix it. I moved it on 1 hour, you know, a couple of springs ago, and it just went completely haywire. I've tried moving it back. Well, obviously I had to move it back come October, and it that didn't help. Tried switching it off and on again, you know. No idea at all. Yeah, cuckoo clock engineers, let me know what the problem is, please. If any of you happen to be watching. Any cuckoo clock engineers in the house? Yes. Anyway, that's enough of that. Yeah. See you in the next one. Bye for now.